Top man. Oh, that's what I like to hear. Anywhere that I can help, so at any point anyone has any questions or anything that you're struggling with, if you're interested in stuff that at least I'm presenting, then have a word with me and I will at least strive to guide you towards some things to be able to level up. What I'm trying to share with you and expose you guys to in this module is a really contemporary approach to working in the field with musculoskeletal aches and pains. It's not the hallmark of what your exam is, but I have a feeling, and from the feedback and what I've seen of students in years gone by, is this stuff really sows a seed that you'll potentially come back to later on. But what I'm going to take you through today, also from my experience, is quite difficult for you to be able to remember. Okay, so what I'm proposing to do today is to record my session for my own reflection, that I will then use for my own teaching, and then any of you can have that if you want to. Does anybody in here object to me recording my class? All happy with that? Yeah. Cool. So that camera over there is just rolling, and that's what this is here. So if you could just come and sit, just so that you are able to see the board.
The code isn't working.
Code's not working. That's first. Let me just sort that. Is that just you, or is everybody? Paul? Code's not working for these guys. Okay, so there's not many of us in class today, which is a good chance for us to be able to be a little bit more intimate with being able to help you guys with some of the stuff that we're going to be going through. Now, last session, we introduced the idea of finding an entry point, having an end goal, working backwards, using the grandfather story to be able to give you a roadmap of how simple rehab could be. What we touched upon and what we looked at with what that video doesn't show is the thoughts, beliefs, and expectations of the person of the gentleman heading into the program. So what I want to share with you today is building on that as to how we might be able to work with someone from a movement or a body up perspective, as Louis Gifford would describe, and also simultaneously through top down. Okay, so we can't simply talk people out of rehab or counselling. We can, but then that's potentially not going to be a true biopsychosocial approach. We also will do well not to just exercise people. Okay, so that's what we're talking about when we say top down during bottom up. It's being able to have a rehabilitation approach that has both a movement component and an educational component. And actually, if we can do that simultaneously, that's when we have what we call experiential learning. If you have been told and you've had a scan that shows that you have a degeneration in your back, you have a disc herniation, you have a rotator cuff tear, these structural findings that you think are going to mean I'm going to need to protect my shoulder, I'm going to have to protect my back. If I'm going to be looking at the research and saying that's not necessarily a roadblock for us being able to get going, probably the most powerful way that I'm going to show you that is for you to experience that, to challenge it yourself. Okay, and that's what we're talking about. That's what I introduced last week with this JP Canero paper, is that the power of experiential learning is so much more powerful than anything I'm going to say to you guys or anything that you're going to say to your patients. So to that end, what we have done is introduced some resources called, and I learned this last week when I did the session with your year group, Pain Neuroscience Education. And I'm going to open up again. Is that something that any of you guys are familiar with? Or is that a new term straight off the bat?
I think we had a lecture on it for management.
I know you've had a lot of material on I've seen Blackboard, so I know you all had a lot of this, but that doesn't necessarily mean that anyone's read it. So that's why, again, I don't want to use it as assumed knowledge. I want to be able to meet you where you're at to be able to help you get going. You have had Pain Science. What was your name again? Stephen. We had a chat last week about some of the things that come up that I wanted to at least guide you to some of the material that would help you level up with the contemporary pain neurobiology. That's really assumed knowledge, and if that's something that you are feeling, and again, that's not in any way something to feel inferior about. I teach postgraduate, and it's not assumed knowledge for a lot of people. Okay, so if we can get Lorimer Moseley last week was a new name on a lot of people. Is that a new name here? Or have you heard of him? New name, Lorimer Moseley and David Butler. These guys have a book called Explain Pain. It's not new now, but it's still not mainstream for implementation. That is a really good resource for you guys to become at least familiar with, to be able to explain pain. Another offshoot of that is something called Pain Neuroscience Education, which I'm going to take you through today, because I've had 2 of these boxes put into your clinic for you to have to help you with top-down during bottom-up. You'll hear people talk about things like psychologically informed components of working in musculoskeletal rehab, physios, chiropractors. We're not just body workers anymore. We need to appreciate, for example, with back pain, that depression, anxiety, these things, far more predictive of posture, core strength, anything biomedical. So how do we bring in components of psychologically informed care without becoming a psychologist? Because again, I think there's limitations around being a psychologist because they don't work with the body. So it's pathological categorization that I think would do well to shift from. How far do we go in terms of working with someone from a psychological perspective without becoming a psychologist? I think is a nice thing for you to wrestle with. What is in our scope and what isn't? When do you need to be able to send someone to have a psychology consult, for example, as opposed to looking at the research and saying exercise, movement, lifestyle modifications, these things have a massive impact on mental health, which has a massive impact on back pain. And that's what we're trying to bring in with this Pain Neuroscience Education, which is a psychologically informed component to impact. Again, as it's on its own, doesn't outdo anything else, the same as exercise doesn't, the same as manual therapy doesn't. As a package of care, this is a really helpful way to help address particularly fear with movement. We looked at Ben Cormack's stuff last week around how with the tendinopathy stuff, some of the loading is really helpful. We've got targets around strength, but when it comes to back pain, neck pain, it's much more about safety and fear behavior. So that's what this has been shown to be able to help us with. The reason why I think this is really helpful is because it gets across a target concept. Now, for you guys as students who wouldn't feel that you know it inside out, and even if you did, getting that across so someone you're helping understands it's a completely different thing. I haven't taught today unless you guys have understood. It doesn't matter what I know. And when you're working with a patient, it doesn't matter what you know if they haven't heard or haven't been able to make sense of what you're talking about. Okay? This, in my experience, was the single biggest thing that helped me have confidence to set up a practice on my own 6 months after graduating, because it gives you a framework of a target concept. So in this example here is to get across that pain is like an alarm system, that it's not a tissue damageometer. Because once we make that step, we are able to see that other things can set off the alarm system, not just tissue damage, which most people's assumption when they have back pain is what?
That's what's happening in their mind, isn't it?
Yeah, well, if you've got back pain, or what do you think? They think it's an injury. They're going to think it's an injury. And when we look at the data and we see that about 90% of musculoskeletal aches and pains, it's not nociception, it's non-specific. So the vast majority, we need to be able to look at a broader perspective, because other things, once we appreciate that the nervous system is like an alarm system, other things can set it off, including temperature, including the immune system, including stress, including all of these things, not just tissue damage. And that's, again, that makes sense then when we can see that anxiety, depression, these sorts of things, far more predictive of aches and pains, and where our management might do well to try and impact. So when you have this, it gives you a very playful way of being able to say, if you were to tread on a rusted nail, and I would offer this, if you were going to tread on a rusted nail, would you want a system to be able to tell you about that?
Yeah.
Why?
So that I don't just carry on walking around with a nail.
What would be the implications of stepping on a rusted nail?
And get tetanus.
Tetanus, and take that one step further,
Infection.
and even further again, you could die. So there's this implications of us developing a system is that infection, we need a system to tell us that that's a threat, do something about that to be able to protect that, and the nervous system is what we've got going all around our body, 400 nerves, and the brain is on top of that, connecting it all like with the analogy that it is an electrical impulse that is what's firing our nervous system. Most people are familiar with that, and if you tread on a rusted nail, exactly right, you would want something to tell you, don't do that, potentially could be serious, could die, and rest. And what should happen is, as you back off for a period of time, is the nervous system should come back down for the next time that you wanted to be able to know that you're going to have a threat. Okay? This is a really nice way, because I'm going to whistle through this one because this isn't what I want to emphasize today, but what you'll have on the back is a guide for your storytelling. And that is so powerful for you to learn and know this resource, because it takes, you know, when I'm delivering this now, I don't have to memorize this. I know how to use it. Then, again, if you look at Lorimer Moseley, if you look at a lot of people who, you know, you may not want to go into teaching, you may not want to go into education, but if you're going to work with patients, you're going to be educating and teaching every day. So we do well to be able to learn what people are doing, and storytelling is what helps us to be able to get buy-in, to be able to help people to actually change behavior. And that's what you have on the back here, and you don't just have little prompts for you to guide how to connect what is on the image. You have all the literature to be able to back up what you're talking about as well, if someone was to be, as we would hope, a critical thinker and challenge what we're talking about, because that's what we would openly want someone to be able to do. And the implications are, as we work through, yeah, we have an alarm system on this building, you have an alarm system on your car. What's the alarm designed to tell you about? If your car alarm is going off now, what is that potentially going to mean to you?
Someone's trying to get into it.
So there's a threat. Either there's a fire in there, someone's trying to break into it. The alarm system is going to try and protect your car. That's
To make you aware.
to make you aware, to bring your attention, to do something about it. And that's really what our nervous system is all about. Most people will then get to the point of, if we do a good job with this, we get people away from looking for postural changes, muscle imbalances, again, because the evidence base is just it's just indisputable about these things now. We're not really at a conversation anymore to be able to say that those things are causative of pain. But these things typically are. Failed treatments. A lot of people will have seen a chiropractor, they'll have seen a physio, they'll have seen the doctor. Why has no one been able to understand and sort my pain? Family concerns. Everyone will have different things. Some people may have an ill family member. Some people may be going through a divorce. Some people will have a teenager and all those things introduced. Some people may not have a family. Every one of us in here would have these are called psychosocial sensitizers, and these things, job issues, different explanations for aches and pains, these things will be where our alarm system could be being sensitized by, and that could be what is contributing to ongoing pain and disability that we couldn't impact through behavior change and understanding that that's the case. Now that's just one target concept. That's for an alarm system. That might be what I would want to deliver in one session, and then marry that up with the assessment, marry that up with giving someone some thinking things to go away and say, you know, is any of these things in our control? Can we do anything about it? Not for me to play pseudo-psychologist, but it is for me to be able to connect the fact that, oh, you're living on your own and you're actually lonely. That could have a really big bearing on why you are coming to see me for this back pain that I've done an assessment of, and I can't see any structural reasons to why we could explain your pain. That's the vast majority of back pain and neck pain. So if we can get people to connect some dots with things that's going on in their lifestyle away from us, massive, massive benefit. I have put onto your blackboard, or it's in the lectures, I don't think you've quite had it yet, but this mnemonic, ABCDEFW, which is a series of questions to help you guide. It's in here, it's not in this lecture, but it is to help you ask questions in your history that will inform how much of this is appropriate, because we don't need to pain science everybody. We only need to pain science people who maybe have unhelpful beliefs, things that are going to potentially get in the way of that video of helping them get going. So this is a series of questions, like A is attitudes and beliefs. I would ask you, what do you think is the cause of your pain? And if you're coming back to me and saying, I think the cause of my pain is because I'm having ongoing issues with my husband and the relationship's breaking down, it means I'm not sleeping very well at night, I'm having to work extra hours and really, really burning the candle at both ends, and I'm having to do a lot more of the manual work about the farm, well, I say, okay, this person probably doesn't need too much pain education. They've got a grasp of all the things that we need to help them just find some changes. But if you're coming back to me and saying, I think my back pain is because I'm spending too much time slumped over, or I've got a bad posture, or I've got my glutes aren't firing, or I'm 65 and that's just what happens when you get older, then I'm going to be looking at it and saying, okay, none of these things are actually going to be roadblocks to why this person shouldn't be able to at least get going with those things. Can you see the difference there? And when you have a series of questions, these help you get and jot down what things you might want to challenge. Okay, so that's the ABCDEFW for you to be able to look at. In terms of learning these resources and practicing, when I first come into WIOC in 2018, I had them buy 2 of these. If I was any of you, I would buy one of these for myself. It's about £250. I have no benefit or incentive to be able to suggest that other than how much of a help it is when you're with a patient and you can show them an image and you've got a little cue for yourself to guide the structure, just like having a PowerPoint presentation. Really, really helpful. I can't recommend that enough. Anyone who has mentorship with me, that's what they have to get to help them develop, because once you have the framework, you can improvise. And you develop the ability to change what's on the cards, building your own stories to be able to help bring these things to life. So what I'm going to, last week, some of the exercises and some of the things that I brought to class was, well, the main thing was to help you find an entry and work backwards from the end point. And then we did some games. Were you guys in my class last week where we did some games around 2 weeks ago? Okay, I did introduce a few little games around balance and enjoying magnets to be able to apply novel movement. Now, there would be a target concept in here to be able to get across the benefits of novel movement, why that might violate our nervous system's learned experience that could change the output, because pain is an output. If we can change something, we can change that output. If we can change an understanding, if we can change the conditioning, top down during bottom up. All of these I have also filmed of me doing for you to use to take as inspiration to use or adapt and develop your own. Now, what I'm going to take you through today is, because when you get into clinic, me and Paul we need to be able to say to all of you, can you remember that session last year when we took you through how to use this stuff? I can't then force you to drive, I can't then tell you how you're going to do it, but what I am going to take you through today is how I might marry up using a target concept and into the movement or exercise prescription in the same session, to be able to have buy-in for you to be able to follow it. And the basis of this prescription would hopefully make sense as we go through. But I want you to imagine that you're not sat here now listening to me talking about a load of stuff that you maybe do or don't care about. You're at home, it's the end of term, exams are all over, you're lying back in the sofa and your systems are all in balance, you're chilled out, okay? Then I want you to imagine that, you can imagine that it's in this room here, that a big roaring African lion comes in through the door, okay? Maybe sounds silly, but picture yourself walking back home through Pontypridd graveyard. In the middle of the night, it's pitch black, and then someone touches you on the shoulder. Maybe that's something that would, what might your initial response be there?
Sympathetic system's going to fire off, isn't it?
Yeah, so let's put it in baby terms. What would be the response that you would probably do? Yep, sounds like you've seen my lecture already. But this is how, and I would get this across with patients, would be, you'd probably scream, you maybe run away, or if you couldn't run away, what would you do? Drop to the floor, there's a lion. Okay, so you're in the corner here now. That door won't open. Are you going to drop to the floor, roll over and die? Play dead. Some clever animals might try that. You might try and kick or do something. It means that you would have fight or flight. And if you could describe what you just did, what we just went through there, every single person that you will work with will be able to describe that as well. Because it's, again, don't overthink it. That is the fight or flight stress response that kicks in a massive life or death threatening situation. From the position where you are laying down on in your couch, your muscles would be nice and relaxed. you would be able to maybe sleep. Your immune system's nice and in balance. Your heart rate is nice and low. You may be able to think about romance and things like this. Your digestive system is primed and being prioritized. But to consider all these systems now, which you already started doing, what happens when the lion comes in the room to your heart rate? You just said it. Increases because, again, just keeping the story nice and simple, blood needs to get to your big muscles to be able to fight the lion, to be able to roll on the floor and maybe explode. It needs to be able to fire up the fact that we can have this stress response. Digestive system, what happens when the lion's in the room? Prioritized or not? No. It's not going to be prioritized. Blood's not going to be here. We just said where it's going. Okay, what about muscular tensions? Is our muscles going to be tensed or relaxed? It's going to be tensed. It's going to have to be tensed because I'm going to want to be able to produce a lot of force through them to either get the hell out of there or to be able to fight it off. Good time to be able to pre-process in coronavirus that's in my system or viruses. Is our immune system, it's not going to be a priority. So that's going to be put on the back burner. Eyes, you already said it before, are they going to be wide or are they going to be narrow? They're going to be wide to see the lion. The lion's coming into the room, so it's not going to be a good time to sleep. Not going to be a good time to feel and want romance. These systems here, you have just described, breathing up or down? Breathe and increase. Again, all of this to get the blood where it needs to be for the things that are going to help us in that situation. Really, really powerful if you are able to explain the stress physiology of when a lion's in the room. There's a really interesting difference between us and animals that I use, and I've developed a story that I put into this to be able to help get this across, was a David Attenborough episode where I love watching animal episodes, and when I was watching a wolf chase a rabbit, I was able to see that this chase went on for about 30 seconds, and in that moment, the rabbit has to get away from the wolf. So all of those things you just described about, fight or flight stress physiology kicks in. Heart rate up, breathing up, eyes wide, got to get away to be able to bring up its babies, pass on copies of its DNA, and that's how it goes. The wolf at the same time has to do the exact same thing. Got to be able to catch the rabbit, so it has blood, heart rate up, breathing up, eyes wide to be able to catch it. And this is a chase that goes on for 30 seconds in full fight or flight stress physiology, and it doesn't catch the rabbit. And where I help this to try and get this across when I'm working and getting across these simple ideas is what happens immediately afterwards. Is because the wolf is able to just lie down and forget that anything's happened, waiting for the next time the rabbit, and the rabbit is just walking around eating grass. They're able to turn the fight or flight stress physiology on. They're able to turn it off. Robert Sapolsky, that I learned last week was a new name on you guys.
No, we studied that every year one, wasn't it? I think.
So Robert Sapolsky is the author of Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers.
Oh.
Classic book. Can't recommend highly. Against one of my recommended reads. And in 2017, a book called Behave. He's the godfather of understanding stress, because he built on the early research back in the 50s from Hans Selye, who coined the word stress to be able to understand the general adaptation syndrome. And Robert Sapolsky spent he's in his 60s now, lecturer in Stanford, incredible person, and he lived half of his life in Africa studying baboon tribes and primates to be able to produce all of this primary research. Anyway, if you watch any of his stuff, what he talks about is that the stress response is designed for the 30-second sprint. It's not designed for a 30-year mortgage. And that is a really interesting difference, is that if we are not able to, like the wolf and rabbit, switch our fight or flight stress physiology off, then all those systems that we just described that were not important when the lion just came into the room, things like sleeping, well, we know that sleep is a massive, almost causal potential factor for aches and pains. No wonder someone's sleep's going to be poor if they're living in fight or flight stress physiology. Digestive system, we just said it wasn't important. So all of a sudden then, again, if the blood's going to be diverted away for a prolonged period of time, longer than 30 seconds, a month, a year, 10 years, a lot of people will be burning the candle both ends, then IBS is something you'll see and hear people talk about. They get that as a diagnosis, it comes with it. There is going to be implications for pain. You know, if you were running from the lion for a 30-second burst, would you feel the nail that you trod on? probably not still have tissue damage, but we're able to have an amazing system that means we probably don't have pain. But if we're running away from the lion for 10 years, well, that pain processing system can become part of the problem. It becomes inaccurate as a measure of tissue damage, and it is where stress and lifestyle things can be the things that are contributing and driving our aches and pains. You can see how that connection now all of a sudden has a tangible neurobiological, makes sense, as opposed to just going to the doctor and saying, oh, your back pain, you're stressed. Because most people's response when you say that is what?
No, it's not.
I'm not stressed. Stop telling me I'm fucking stressed. You know what I mean? And that's what I will have to be able to work quite hard to be able to get across with when I'm working with someone. We're not talking about stress here. We're talking about stress physiology. And let's have a look at what happens to the systems when we're talking about stress physiology, because where our job might be is to be able to help somebody have a prescription towards some things that get them back into fight or flight to be able to help balance these systems. Because whilst we don't have an African lion coming into the room, we did maybe 10,000 years ago, what we have now is, my phone's over there recording, but I can look at my phone and get a message from my accountant that can put me into full-blown fight or flight stress physiology purely by the thought of seeing, Christ, I've got something I've got to go and do, financial emergency. My girlfriend's just dumped me. Oh, Christ, exams, these things. The thought of the lion is what is different to us and the wolf and the rabbit, because that is what we have these days, is psychosocial things, psychological things that can put us into the full stress, fight or flight physiology. And that can happen for years. And being able to help people make that connection, what I would use this for then is to be able to say that we wouldn't have not an African lion, but a metaphorical African lion. And every one of us will have these that will be different. Having pain for a long period of time can be part of that lion. Anxiety and fear of movements. We just talked about how contemporary musculoskeletal rehab is much more around fear and safety learning, because it's a worrying thing if I've had this pain for a long period of time and I don't understand it, I'm injured, I'm constantly injured, I'm injuring myself more. You know, failed treatments, money concerns, job issues, these things are all going to be what makes up someone's individual lion. Some things are going to be in our control, some things aren't. And that's going to be something that I would want you to go away and have a think about, what would make yours up. Exam stresses, getting through university. Every one of you, and you might not even want to share some things, but it's for you to have for yourself to be able to connect to how this could be driving and contributing to your stress physiology. In terms of if you want to be able to just give some clarity around how's this connected to my back pain, you know, we have things like adrenaline and cortisol. You guys are going to be familiar with that. Most people are going to be familiar with that. That's what happens when we have fight or flight stress physiology. These things contribute to our mood, our energy levels, sleep, concentration, which then comes full circle to create sore, sensitive, deconditioned tissues. That then, we have that really local back pain that keeps coming and going. Can we break that cycle? Can we do things to help shift the balance of things that we see if we're in stress physiology for a prolonged period? Muscular tensions, we talked about before when we're running away from the lion. Muscles tense or relaxed? Tense. Again, helpful in the short term, but over a prolonged period, those tense muscles, when we're talking about non-specific aches and pains, can become one of the main things that we're going to be trying to work on and try and help you down-regulate some of these tensions. That then opens the door, hopefully, for you to be able to see how the things that we're going to work on today is going to be not about adding more stress and tension, like stability exercises. You know, most people, when they have a wrist injury, they wouldn't walk around clenching their fist. We're going to try and relax it and maybe gently get going. And we're going to take the same approach with the back. Okay? If a lion cub, 6 weeks old, crawls in through there now, would you roll over and die then? No. Why not? Unless you had some sort of, and it gives you a little guide, unless you had some sort of fetish or fear about cuddly toys, you probably wouldn't. In fact, you'd probably go and pet it and you would probably embrace it. And that's a little metaphor, again, I'd like to carry into this rehab program around turning a big roaring African lion into a lion cub by understanding a bit more about pain and how these things work. Okay, so each week when in this rehab program, there's going to be some concepts we're going to work through, but it's going to connect to the exercise and things that we're going to be doing to turn your roaring lion into a lion cub. And that's a little metaphor that we're going to use to be working through this. So if you're up for it, and again, I could ask you to do a little bit of homework to reflect on that. Anyone who's interested, speak to me about how I do that with clients, because I would want you to be able, for example, stories become sticky. If I was to ask you to come back next week and I want you to have a little think about being able to explain the wolf and rabbit story, do you reckon that you could remember the wolf and rabbit story? And what was the relevance of that? And I would give people a little cue so that it's not like you feel stupid. They have the ability to turn it on, or they also have the ability to turn it off. Fucking hell, what things have I got in my life that are keeping my stress physiology on? How do I find ways to break that cycle? The things that you enjoy doing, what's that? Things that you've stopped doing that you just literally enjoy doing. For me, what are classic relaxation things that we will see people talk about in healthcare? Exercise can be one, but there's probably, in terms of stress stuff, that is probably going to be higher up on most people's list.
Stress will be job, wouldn't it? Finances, job.
Yeah, I'm thinking
Family,
I'm thinking things that people will often do for stress. Meditation. Yeah, these types.
I did it last night, Sunday, I did.
Yeah, there's a massive evidence base for the impact of things like yoga, mindfulness, meditation, because they are mind-body practices. They are not treating the body like dualism, splitting the head, and they are an integrated approach. I had the author of Integrated Rehabilitation Practices, Matt Erb, on my internship last night, talking about and trying to build the evidence base of these mind, body, spiritual practices, because the evidence base is so robust and it helps shift and help balance in a life where we're go, to help people slow down and find time to be able to hit that balance. Now, if you were to get me to do yoga, I've had yoga teachers work for me. If you were to get me to do meditation, I know the people who run the app Headspace. I've tried it and I can talk about the evidence base around it all day long. It just doesn't work for me. So being able to adapt to things that I am going to stick to and they're going to help me find flow could be things like playing a musical instrument, could be going for a walk with my dog. You are going to find out what it would be for me by talking with me and drawing that out from me. It could be reading a book that you don't have time to do because you've got exams, because you've got other things that you've got putting on, and I'm going to prescribe that back to you. All of a sudden, prescription there can become really fun, and you can make a lot of sense for being able to get people doing things away from us, impacting the 23.5 hours of the day away from us rather than just what's happening on the bench. And that, I think, is not worth dismissing. But the way I'm going to connect what we've just been chatting through today is the muscular tensions. I'm going to be giving us some exercises to help us to be able to work on down-regulating some of those muscular tensions. So the thought that I want you to take into these exercises and movements that we're going to apply today are going to be for relaxed movement. Okay? Every one of you came in here nice and relaxed, being able to just have your own rhythm and your own swing. That is a goal for end-stage rehab, is thoughtless, fearless, relaxed movement. I don't want you thinking about your back. I don't want you thinking about your knee. I want you thinking about the task. And to that end, that is something called the constraints-led approach. Can you just get the slide up for me, Paul? Here, that is in the lecture to help us take an approach to rehabilitation that encompasses that we've all got different bodies and physical limitations. For example, if I was playing basketball against you, your height's going to be a limitation against me. And unfortunately, that's something we have to accept. If I'm going to try and achieve a middle split, my internal rotation of 5 degrees is an individual limitation. I can improve it, but there has to be an acceptance around as an individual constraint. The environment is another one. We're in a clinic here with benches around. I want us to be aware of what is around us, but being able to manipulate the posters that are on the wall, the information that's on the board, that influences the behavior of us and when we're working with patients. And the thing that we have the most control over is tasks. So what I'm doing in these sessions is giving you an exposure to some tasks and ideas how to be able to change that task, which we had to play with magnets last week. We had to play with some balance and pushing games. Really, once you open up the Pandora box with this approach, it becomes about finding and exposing yourself to as many tasks and then being able to clinically reason how you could use that with a person with back pain. Remember, it's often not about injury, it's about safety learning, giving someone permission and confidence to move. This session that we've just done here would be probably 3 or 4 sessions in for me into a program. After getting hurt doesn't equal harm, we can be sore but safe to be able to explore some of these movements. Okay, so 2, 4, 6. Thankfully, we have even numbers. So what I'm going to do to get us warm into the session is we're going to have a little review of the game, first to 3 from last week, with a slight variation. Close you. What's your name? Megan. Were you here 2 weeks ago? Super. So if you can just stand here, we are going to play a game of making some constraints. Again, I'm in charge of the constraints because I'm just the person that's leading. When you're going to be with your partner or when you're working with someone, you make the rules. The essence of a constraints-led approach is we can change the rules at any point. And that's what I'm talking about here, about progressing and regressing appropriately. So as you guys adapt to these games here now, I want you to note how I might change the games to be able to keep a flow to the process to facilitate relaxed movement. Okay? But the goal is going to be, I'm going to make a constraint first and foremost. We are going to go single leg. You pick which leg. Left, you pick which leg for me.
Right.
So I'm going to be on my right leg, okay? So from here now, we are not able to touch anything other than our reaching leg, okay? And I want you to put that foot down or move that foot, and even a millimeter is a point. Okay, so I'm a lot bigger than you. This isn't a power game. You've got to be able to try and move my foot. You up for it? Mm-hmm. So we can only touch reaching legs. Can't touch anything else. I can't touch this leg. But now the goal is to see if you can make me put this foot down. One 0. Okay? Again, I've played this game a lot. I want you to have a little go just to warm each other up. First to 3, and then we're going to swap partners, and then we're going to introduce some new tasks to help explore some of this movement. Okay? Good stuff. Into partners, doesn't matter which one you're with, because you're going to probably play against each person in the room here. First to 3 with the rules that I've just offered there, and then we will have a little look at progression. This is just a little review from last week. Be aware of the people around you. If both people move, no point. First to 3. So that's a point to somebody there.
It's all about being off balance, isn't it?
Well, here's an interesting thought. Here's an interesting thought experiment. Take into this next game you're in now, being strong and rigid, and see how that goes for you. Right? So that's the image I want to take into this game against your partner now, is being rigid. Rigid like a building made of concrete. See how that thought works for you. Then, in the next game, try and embody maybe bamboo or something that's a bit more fluid, right? And see if that helps you, because again, you need to be able to be strong in one body part and relaxed in another one at the same time.
We're fluidly now, yeah?
Anyone got to 3 yet? Okay, right. On the far side, stay where you are. These guys rotate downwards. So Megan, move down one. What was your name?
Sasha.
Sasha, move down one. And your name?
Hero.
Hero? Yeah. I should remember that one. Hero. Okay, new game. Make sure that you're not going to hit benches. First to 3. Different nervous system, different experience. Same game now, so with the constraints, you can use whatever image you find helped more. Did you find that the rigid image or the fluid image helped you to be able to win a game?
Rigid helped me, yeah. If I got fluid on this, well, I know you have to
Right, I'm seeing a foot move here. No point.
Hey. Right, ready?
What's the score here?
Yeah. Oh, I just put my foot down.
Can't even strong enough.
No, we're both fell over. Can't put the strong down.
You are strong. Can we go strong again, yeah?
What's the score here?
I think it's 1-2 to me.
1-2.
I can't remember what we're on.
1-3. Okay, super. Whether you won or not, irrelevant. Same guys stay the same. There should be one more rotation. Is anybody now in here won both their games? Okay, new partner. Let's see first to 3. Point. Oh, actually, did you hold it?
Yeah. It's pointy.
Remember, if both people move. Morning, boss. Okay, and relax. So, what we are going to do now is, hopefully that was a nice little warm-up, and again, I want you to be able to, I'm not giving you exact clinical reasoning for these things here yet, but that's something that I would do a lot with people in single leg rehab, ankle type stuff, but making it, each one of you there, it's done about 2-minute sets, but you didn't even really realize. And it becomes about the task, getting you out of your body to be able to enjoy that, which is also clinical reasoning of itself, making something enjoyable and fun. San Angel. But what we're going to do now is, can I use yourself? Okay. I'm going to introduce a new task, right? So that task there was a balanced task using some gains. I could add another variation on that where we could go back into single leg. So we're going to go both left leg, whichever one you want is most comfortable. Okay. And from here, I'm going to make the rules and say that we can only touch legs, but then we could also add in, for example, pushing of the hands. We can't grab, but this will be connecting to what we did last week. Just adds a progression.
Here, magnet.
Say again?
Magnet. Here. Leg.
Not magnet. This is, again, we could do this with magnet. Hopefully see now that we could change the rules and say it's magnet. Yeah? So we could say magnet and say that you're leading, and I'm going to stay in contact. I'm not going to give you any resistance. So make sure that you give me a chance. So here's, yeah, exactly. You've got to be able to adapt now so that I can stay with you, because now it's not me against you. It's me with you in a movement relationship. And maybe we could work for a period of time there. That's not what I had in mind, but hopefully you can see how you could use that if you wanted to be able to explore that. I'm going to use an image now of an arrow. Archery, okay? So the constraints I'm going to offer is that your feet don't move off the ground that you're on, and my arrow goes in a straight line, and if it hits you, it kills you. You don't want to die. There's going to be a punishment that means whoever loses this game now is going to be doing sprints outside against me. Okay, so don't get hit by the arrow. Okay? So I'm going to make some rules. You don't break the rules, but then anything else goes. So it facilitates some problem solving and individual solutions. So my arrow, don't touch it, and I'm going to show clear intention, and then you're just going to come back to the start position once you have finished. And I'm going to offer the arrow in different positions.
All right. Okay.
Good. And if he finds one that's difficult to be able to, yes, just start exploring some different answers. Into your partners, we're going to have, I want to give you exposure to a lot of progressions here. So you're going to have a minute and then swap over, and then we're going to come back in. The constraints I'm offering is don't move off the floor that you stood on and don't touch the arrow. Arrows don't do this. Arrows go straight.
Okay.
Arrows go straight. Good. And then you just come back to the start position. And I want you to try and be nice and fluid in responding to wherever the movement question might be. Right, into pairs quickly. Minute, decide who is asking the movement question and decide who is responding. We're going to have 60 seconds. Not that. So the tool at the moment, guys, is an arrow. Right?
Okay.
So it's an arrow. Arrows only go straight. That's what I wanted to use for this set here. If the movement question doesn't ask you to move, then you just stand there. Right? So this is, you've got to get into someone's space. Good. The person who's asking the questions is able to move around and explore. They don't have, you're not constrained to staying where you are if you're asking the movement question. Good. 3, 2, 1, and relax. Look here for a second, Sasha.
Yeah.
So this time I'm going to just, again, as I said, if I was working with you individually, I'd probably spend a bit of time here now, but I'm going to progress and add a constraint. Because what I'm seeing is really nice answers, no one's getting killed, and that is nice. So I'm going to challenge you a little bit more now, and I'm going to increase the idea that I want you to still not get killed, but I want you to move as little as possible and not get killed, right? Which means that I can start to target where the movement affordance might be, where you might explore. So if I come here, I want you to move as little as possible. So I'm not asking you to move yet. I'm not asking you to move. I'm still not asking you to move. I'm still not asking you to move. Well, I reckon you can move less.
Okay.
Well, we've got a big jumper here, but so you don't move your feet. Again, so I can be really accurate now in trying to challenge where the movement is going to go. It's her job to be able to find a movement solution, and I can make it really challenging that offers. If she needs to find movement from somewhere else, boom, she finds it. But I still think that you can do that and do it with less movement. So make sure you can see, make sure you can see. Boom. All of a sudden, I'm starting to facilitate her exploring movement solutions to the same input. Dynamic Systems Theory 101. Okay, into your partners, new cue, new idea, move as little as possible, but don't get killed. And here's an idea. I'm going to add this to 2 groups for you to see. Now the arrow is not your hand, it's a stick. The arrow is now a stick, same concept, but you can get more local. Nice. Good. I'm seeing some really nice local challenges to the chest and neck here. Nice. 3, 2, 1. Super. And bring it in. Okay, imagine I could make you do that for 2-minute sets. We're going to bring it on now, so I'm going to bring myself back in and I'm going to work with you. So this time the constraints are going to be our feet don't move from the ground that we're on, and back to arrows, but with the hands. So if I ask a movement question, 1-0, that's we're going to have a race outside. And then as soon as I finish, you ask me a question. So now it's not just question, answer, it's question, answer alternating. Okay, so you ask me a movement question, and if I don't get asked to move, I'm not going to, then it's going to be my go. If we're too far away that we're not reaching, then we need to get closer. You could do, or if I frame this appropriately, let's see how this unfolds now. With the information that I've given, it's going to be movement, question and answer. We can't break the rules of moving our feet. And then we're also going to try and move as little as possible to the arrow. All of a sudden, it starts to cultivate a bit of a sense of flow. Okay? And actually, it's the non-verbal communication that I'm really interested in.
Okay.
Do you see what I'm saying? But I need to give enough verbal communication to frame the task. But then we could really do this, and we could change the constraints now to make this like legs, all sorts, but with the idea of what I just offered. Okay? Into your partners, I want you to have a go at question and answer. So as soon as the other person has finished, your turn to be able to ask a question. Anything goes. Happy? 60-second set. And try and bring in that sense of, remember the image that we took into this one, guys, was relaxed movement. That's what we're trying to work on here, is relaxed movement. We need to show clear intention. We're not trying to catch our partner out. We're trying to give them an experience of gentle ease of movement. Good. And let's see if we can develop a sense of almost like a movement relationship between our partners as we spend time here. 30 seconds. And relax. Cool. Starting to see, even just in this short period of time here, the cultivation of a little bit of sense of flow. For the last minute, I'm just going to show you an idea of how I might build this and challenge one of you to be able to progress this if this was something that someone found comfortable. And I've worked with you because I've just been done a couple of tasks. If I'm going to change constraints now, just because I'm going to challenge you, it's going to be single leg. Okay. Okay? So you pick the leg.
Left.
As soon as the right stays off the floor, clock goes on. Right? So that can't touch the floor. You can't touch my stick now. So now it's not an arrow that goes straight. This stick could go in any direction, right? So you're going to try and work for 60 seconds, just not touching my stick or breaking that rule, right? So I'm in control here now of how hard I make this for her, because if she's struggling, I need to reduce my intensity. I'm already seeing this ankle, look what it's doing. I can then see what she's like if I ask a really tough question. Boom. Good. 20 seconds. Say that I want to be focusing on her knee, then maybe I target my questions towards the knee. Maybe I want to give her an experience of exploring low back flexion, and this is what I may be working on. As the movement gets comfortable, I can start to challenge her. If she's using this leg a lot, how is she going to respond until she breaks a rule? I've now found her level of engagement. Great stuff, well done.
Thank you.
To see how I just framed the constraints there, but practice of being able to adapt and progress and regress appropriately to find where somebody's at. The clinical reasoning here I offer for you guys was relaxed movement. So did those tasks facilitate tense movements or relaxed movement? Relaxed. And that would be how I would try and frame that to get buy-in, and also when you're going away to be able to practice, maybe some of your mind-body stuff, some yoga, or whatever it may be, to be able to try and loosen up and take these images into some of these movements. Pain Neuroscience Education connected to a constraint-based approach to exercise prescriptions. Does that make some sense? I've filmed this because what I found is that people can see me doing it and adapt it, but really the skill, if you were to watch this now, would be how I change that on the fly. You have to be able to change it on the fly. And that's what the research says on the constraints-led approach. Okay? Because if someone's finding it really easy, or if someone's finding it really challenging, we've got to be able to regress it. So imagine that Sasha or Tasha? Sasha was a 80-year-old and we're working on balance. Well, single leg would have been inappropriate. But both feet on the floor, same game. She's on a Zimmer frame, so she has to hold this with one hand, and then we're going to play. You get the idea. Good stuff. Couple of videos. Paul, did you want to show this?
It's on the materials. We've got to wrap up into ortho, but there's examples of WEOC graduates on your learning materials doing things like this in some of these games. Check them out. Check out the learning materials and the functional management resources. There's good stuff on there, and you guys don't look at them enough. I can tell when you look at them. And not many of you have. But there's good stuff on there.
Did you enjoy that?
Yeah.
Clinical reason in of itself, making rehabilitation engaging and fun. Okay? Good stuff. I'll see you guys next week.